today's case study, we all know that trying to get people to be more consistent in project delivery in any company is quite a challenge, but trying to do that at an industry level is the kind of case study that we've lined up for today, okay? Just do introductions very quickly, so you can match photo to person. Obviously, I'm Pip, and let me introduce Mike from Network Rail as well, okay? Cool. For this session, what we wanted to do is just make sure you understand the current situation that Network Rail faced, talk about what the vision is. This is probably the first phase of making that vision a reality. There are further enhancements as we go, and we'll talk to that at the end. We'll go through the solution, the outcomes, benefits, and also just maybe address some of the challenges that we faced on the way. But Mike, I wonder, first probably is you just give a bit of background about Network Rail. And
absolutely, thank you very much. It's very romantic, isn't it? Just half a dozen of us. It's end of a day. So I don't know how familiar you are with Network Rail. We operate, maintain, renew the country's railway infrastructure, every bit of infrastructure, bar some small bits owned by High Speed 1 and Transport for Wales. We operate, maintain, renew. To do that, we deliver, it's £47 billion is the number on the screen. That's our capital expenditure over a 5-year control period in project terms. And then when we're thinking about how do we control that project portfolio, it's 6,000 projects per year. They range from what we call minor renewals. It's keeping the railway running, end-of-life assets. They can be relatively minor, maybe £100,000, £200,000 upwards, up to our enhancements portfolio, which is a £2.5 billion portfolio per year over the next 5 years. And it is a really challenging environment we work in. So we've got political challenges, we've got funding challenges that stem partly from the political nature of it. It's a very public-facing portfolio, so we need to understand our projects and we need to be able to communicate with them clearly and articulately, not just to our funders, but to ministers and the general public. We've been through quite some challenging changes in terms of understanding, managing, controlling that portfolio. 5 years ago, we were a single national organisation. I sat in a function that had full oversight of our whole project portfolio. We had a very strong programme controls function that really got into the nitty-gritty of understanding at quite a granular level what every project was doing, what our performance looked like, and that enabled us to roll it up to a programme and a portfolio level. A few years ago, we devolved, so we're now 5 regional businesses which have been given autonomy to manage their projects the way they see best fit, to suit local needs, to suit local funders. So that's bringing a lot of innovation, new ways of working, which is fantastic. But again, from a controls perspective, we've gone from one way of working to lots of ways of working, so that comes with its challenges. But the real thing for us, which kind of leads into our case study, we were really privileged in terms of the funding we get from the UK government. When we were going through COVID and Boris announced on behalf of the Conservative government the Build Back Better policy that the Conservatives had, investment in construction and the infrastructure sector was one of their big commitments. That was a commitment of £2.5 billion per year. That's our major enhancements that I mentioned earlier. But it didn't come without its challenges. We've got to deliver faster, cheaper and safer. We can't continue to deliver projects that have cost overruns, have huge schedule overruns, and everything that goes with that. And that kind of, if you want to jump on to the next slide, really led us to, okay, well, how do we respond to that? How do we respond to this massive challenge? And actually the tagline from number 10 Downing Street when they phoned up, I think it was our chair at Network Rail, was half the time and half the cost of your projects, and deliver them in a controlled way, and don't have cost overruns, and really don't get any MPs sacked. It's a bit awkward, isn't it, when you don't turn your phone off? So where were we? We had a project lifecycle at the time, GRIP. GRIP was a kind of a paint-by-numbers approach to project management, how it'd come about. It started off as broadly a Prince 2 framework that we'd adapted to suit us. The intent was always that projects would tailor it. But actually, over time, it went from a tailorable approach to a bit of a paint-by-numbers approach. So every project did the same thing in the same ways. And you can imagine we've got projects like TRU, Transpennine Route Upgrade, is it's a £1 billion project, sorry, over a decade, versus a small £100,000 project. They don't need the same level of controls, they don't need the same level of governance, yet all of our projects are doing that. So our big projects aren't applying enough, our small projects are applying too much. So how did we go about changing that? Well, this bit here, speed was at the heart of that for us. That was how do we respond to the government challenge? How do we reduce costs, reduce time, improve safety, deliver better projects, quite simply, faster, cheaper, safer. One of the big things that came out of that was we needed to break away our existing governance. Part of it was the governance itself, but actually a lot of it was that mindset, the culture that goes with it. Project managers who want to pick up a process, do step 1, do step 2, do step 3, project delivered. What we learned was doing step 1, step 2, step 3 delivers some good projects, but on the whole it delivers a lot of projects that cost too much money and take too long. We did a root and branch review. We really went out and said, okay, if we had a blank bit of paper, what could we do? Ultimately, we scrapped GRIP, we put in place a new project lifecycle and the governance that goes with it. It's not all that distinctly different, but the big point we were making behind that was actually we now really need to think as project managers, as sponsors, what are the right things to do for my project, for my stakeholders, and working within the risks and constraints that I've got. So we launched PACE. PACE is the project lifecycle that we now operate within Network Rail. That covers our 6,000 projects a year, and it's operated by in the region of 3,500 internal project managers, 20-odd thousand people in our supply chain. The big piece for us then is how do you mobilise a change like that, and how do you really build the control into the lifecycle? PACE stands for Project Acceleration, which was the important bit from the government's mandate to reduce time, but it's got to be in a controlled environment. And that's where we started working with Method Grid to really understand how can we give people better access to our tools, better access to our processes and systems so that they could be deployed more effectively.
Do you want me to talk to this one?
Yeah, talk a little bit
sure.
to this one.
I think this is really the problem statement that a lot of organisations have. When you're trying to communicate methodology, process, a lot of the traditional approach is, well, I've written it all down, I've put it all on SharePoint, go and find it. And that is the core problem that we have in any internal organisation. But when you're responsible for the industry delivery, it's not just the internal employees, it's also a challenge when you want the supply chain to be able to access the same knowledge, the same templates, the same process and the same standards in order to be able to effectively deliver it. And I think when we looked at the problem statement, when Mike communicated to us quite clearly, is look, I've got a spreadsheet that's downloaded and people are using that. I've got things in this SharePoint site, I've got things in this SharePoint site. It's very difficult for us to be able to communicate and control that effective delivery and communicate the method with clarity across just our employees, but also at the industry scale. If you want to add anything to that one, Mike?
I think I'd add probably it's been a journey for us. I mean, when I started working at Network Rail 15 years ago, I wasn't a project professional by background. I went into a project role probably about 12 years ago, and when I inherited what is now this spreadsheet here, which is what all our project managers picked up in the business, all our sponsors picked up, and it set out what you have to do to deliver a project. You had to print it on A3 paper to stand any chance of being able to read what was written on it, and it was a list of 300-400 odd deliverables. So we'd been through a big rationalisation to get to what is that spreadsheet capture, but actually a spreadsheet is a spreadsheet, and actually how do we communicate that? How do we get people engaged with it? How do we turn a list of things you do into a useful functional tool that people want to use, rather than just seeing as another long shopping list of governance that someone in a central function like me wants was really important.
Coming on to the solution, what we wanted to do with PACE was to provide a kind of universal industry playbook that everyone could access, that would give them access to the information, but rather than designed around, look, here's all the information deliverables, try and orchestrate it around the life cycle of the project. So the playbook is built to orchestrate teams through the different stages, clearly communicate what the deliverables are, what the standards are at each stage. But again, rather than just a line on a spreadsheet with some reference to here's the template, make sure that we provide product descriptions, we're really clear on what the quality criteria is, allow them to be connected to experts. You know, if you have never done this before, or if you want more information, who do you actually go and speak to? Normally it's kind of, you evolve that as a professional, you just kind of work that through in organizations, but industry scale, we need to make sure that we provide more of a glide path for those type of conversations. And then start to introduce that, recognize that people learn using different types of media. So yes, include video explainers, also connect with e-learning. You know, you can't remember when you did that training course, you might have done it 3 months on your joining journey, but actually when you're in delivery, which is a stressful environment, how quickly can I get access to the information I need when I need it? And that was the philosophy really that allowed us to design PACE Digital, which is the playbook. And in summary, really the playbook is just trying to ensure that we are crystal clear on what the process is and also what the compliance is. These are the things that you need to meet, and these are the things that you need to evidence as you go through delivery. But also recognize that whilst there are instructions and tasks that we want you to do, the how you do it is side by side. So that essentially the phrase is that humans are quite lazy. We seek the path of least resistance. And if we can't find the information, and it takes too long, we default to the behavior which is, I'm just going to do it myself. And really what we want to ensure is that the industry didn't have to do that. We're just trying to make sure that they've always got access to the information. And if they need more information and support, and they want to refresh the training that they have when they need it, also being able to access those learning resources as part of the process, rather than just part of an academy and training sort of academy that you designed when you first started.
Yeah. Let's touch on a few more things there, just to emphasise. I mean, for me, processes, procedures, governance standards, whatever we call them, don't deliver good projects. People deliver good projects. The challenge is, how do we make sure 3,500, 20,000 with a supply chain deliver those projects consistently well? And that's the big move from us. Maybe an analogy to use, I drive up until recently an old Land Rover Defender, and it's constantly, it breaks down, it needs something fixing in. And our original version of grip was a bit like, say, the exhaust had gone. You'd go to an instruction manual, it said replace the exhaust. Well, I wouldn't have a clue how to do that, so I've now got to go off and search for the information. I've got to find someone who knows. Reality is, I'm going to take it to a garage. And actually, we did have projects buying in a huge amount of external expertise through consultancy to deliver our projects. When we up-provisioned grip, moved to pace, but still off of a digital platform, it was a bit more like a Haynes manual. It told me where the nuts and bolts were. It helped me understand the difference between my 110 Defender and a 90 Defender, my project versus someone else's project. What do I do? What don't we do? And the digitalising pace has actually enabled us to bring in much more richness of that learning opportunity. So not only do I understand now which nuts and bolts I need to replace, how I need to remove the turbo to get to where the exhaust intake is in the engine, but actually I've got access not just to those written instructions, I've got access to video content, so I can physically see it being done. And where we're maturing this into is actually giving people access into formal e-learning through that platform as well, and a whole wealth of other stuff. It really is designed around how people interact with our procedures, not just giving people a procedure to follow.
Next bit is then really how did we, because the timelines was quite quick. I think we had to get the playbook built within 3 months and then out and tested and piloted for another couple of months before we then formally launched it to the industry. And what we did with the playbook is obviously it incorporates all of the product deliverables that are required in the lifecycle. It also needs to integrate and make sure that all of the 15 standards that relate to pace and execution are referenced in that playbook, but also integrated into the content. There's the use then of video explainers and generating video explainers for that content, and then the addition of adding sign language into that as well. And then also, once we have the playbook built and the knowledge, is then translating, supporting e-learning resources to do that. And the only way that we did this was to build a language model. Well, I wouldn't say we built a language model. We had a language model. Essentially, then we fine-tuned it against existing pace material and the standards, and used that to rapidly generate the content and build. So all of the video explainers that you see on the Pace Digital are all AI built, including the AI generated sign language. Again, whilst we had to one of the challenges making it a publicly accessible resource, you have to meet all the government standards, but to credit to sort of Mike and Sue's vision, how do we make even the content when you watch a video more accessible as well? So integrated sign language was just a step beyond that as well. Mike's here, so I don't need to play this video, Mike, but yeah, just maybe talk about the kind of impact that it's had so far.
Yeah, I mean, the impact has been huge. As I said, our challenge from government's half the time, half the cost of projects. In the last 3 years, we took, not just from Pace, I'll get into a little bit of detail, beyond the top number, we took £1.6 billion out of our projects over a 3-year period, which was cash efficiency we handed back. Broadly speaking, we had better control of the portfolio. That's not to say we had a perfect portfolio, because we didn't, and we still don't, but it's improving. The move from a set way of working under grip with an Excel template that didn't really tell you how to do these things, it just told you what you had to do. That move to PACE alone gave us a £323 million declared efficiency. That is funding that our projects have handed back. They've declared it and taken it out of their budgets. The big win was, how do we make that sustainable? How do we really embed that fast and well? And that's where the digital playbook really came into its own. I mean, I did countless briefings. I think I briefed about 6,000 people across industry between half-hour webinars and half-day sessions. But actually the real value became having it on a digital platform where anyone and everyone could access it. They could delve into the bits they were interested in, and they could learn about those in a really focused way. And really that's what's helped us make that £323 million sustainable. We've got equally sort of same volume of efficiencies we're looking for over the next 5 years as we really embed it and really challenge our ways of working. And the focus on that is, again, I think back to what you said about is how people learn. If I'm on a project, I've got 1,000,001 things going on, I've not got time to learn about every aspect of how I might deliver my project. What's my priority today? So if I'm in the early stages, it's business case writing, it's benefits articulation. If I'm moving on, it might be how do I do a QRA, a QSRA, or so on and so forth. The digital system enables people to deep dive into those areas, so they can find out I need to do this in this stage, but they can focus on how do I do that thing in this stage. 2 months later, it'll be something else they need to do, and again, they can deep dive into the tools, the ways of working to help them do that.
Yeah, the I'll just move that. The other point was also just clarity on what the standards are and what evidence you need to provide. One of the things is obviously there's always gate controls in most project life cycles, and a lot of clients will always go, we have a lot of high gate failure rate, and it's high gate failure rate just by the fact that they didn't know that they needed an EIA or a certain deliverable, and then it just creates more and more. So I think one of the aspects when we built the playbook was to ensure that we make sure that all of the requirements that you need to meet are really clear and easy to find. And that kind of also probably moves us into the kind of next phase of the project to allow the playbook to be used on active projects. But Mike, do you want to, team-wise, I suppose that's a...
Yeah, I mean, this is really important for me, and it's not, I guess, not specific to the case study itself, but it plays out for any type of project you're delivering. I said a minute ago, people deliver good projects. It's not about the systems, the processes, the tools. And actually, to Method Grid's testament, that has been the biggest value they've brought. They've got some fantastic digital technology, but actually where we've valued the most is the collaborative way they've worked with us as one team. We've had expertise from my team, Sue Millington, our head of program management. We've had expertise from Method Grid with Pip and Dom, their CEO, and it's how do we work together to achieve a single vision. And for me, it's a basic lesson in program management. It doesn't matter what companies you come from, what silos you're working in. Actually, if we can start off with a single vision of what good looks like, and how do we work towards achieving that. And for me, that's how this project has been delivered. It's what enabled us to do it in 5 months, from Mike's got a bright idea to deploying something across the industry. And we say industry, actually it's publicly accessible, the read-only version of our playbook. So if your great aunt in Australia who's a sheep farmer wants to read it, she's more than welcome to go and read it and access it. But that came about in those timelines, and the outcome we got really from this team here working well together.
And then, obviously, when we built PACE, it was made that read-only. That was the first playbook. But what's also followed on from that is just additional playbooks that have helped address other problems across Network Rail. So we've done other playbooks for high street working. The playbook that we're working on is for sponsors as well. How do you get your sponsors the information they need more about managing the investment and controlling the project? And as we move forward, it's then looking at, okay, well, I have the playbook as a read-only resource, but naturally I want to be able to tailor PACE to the environment. Then we're starting to look at, well, moving to a more model where you clone the playbook, and then you can tailor, the project manager and the team can then tailor and right-size it for their specific project, upload the evidence and track it off in order to improve the visibility of assurance and compliance as you progress through the life cycle.
And that's a really important point from a controls perspective. So at the moment, it's a read-only playbook. It gives people all that access to learning the tools and how to do it. And what we're now in talks about is actually how do we turn on that extra functionality. So that as a project manager, as a sponsor, someone leading my project, I go in, I look at the requirement, I can filter it down to actually what is it I need to do on my projects. We've built all that criteria in. Is it a legislative requirement? Is it only for projects over a certain cost, et cetera, et cetera. I can then create a clone that's specific to my project. It's only got the things I need to be concerned about, but then I can upload my evidence. I can manage my stage gate reviews from it, which then from someone in a central function like myself gives me a wealth of assurance and controls information I can use, give me confidence, or otherwise, depending how our projects use it, in what we're doing across the portfolio. Where I'd really like to see it mature too, I mean, we do a massive amount of work where we are interacting with people like the Highways Authority, with National Grid. Whenever we engage with other major infrastructure deliveries, there's always challenges because we're using different methodologies, different approaches, different ways of working. Actually, how do they fit together? They normally do, but there's not an easy way of explaining it. Where I'd really like us to get to, certainly as an infrastructure industry, is having a core approach to project management, maybe based on pace, maybe based on something completely different, but actually similar to what we can do now for our own projects in this system. You can turn on core project management, add on rail, add on highways, because that's what's making up your project, and actually we can work on them as wider industry teams. For me, that's the real pinnacle I'd like to get to. It's probably our biggest challenge in a controls space now outside of devolved supply chain is how do we manage control across multiple funded, multi-sponsored projects, which we face daily.
That kind of draws us really to an end for the case study. So obviously, very happy to take any questions, and there's a few links. Obviously, the QR code will give you access to PACE. And then we have a white paper that we wrote with our clients just to explain, well, if you were to go about trying to build a playbook, whether it was internal or if you want to try to attempt the industry one, it's all the kind of things that we've learned over the last 4 or 5 years building playbooks as a resource. I'll just open the floor if you have any questions.
Yeah, so your multiplier 323 million as a comparator to traditional cost, how would you see that? How much did you spend in order to create this relative to how much you've saved? Have you got a rough idea in terms of multipliers?
I spent on this less than 200. It was in the region of £200,000 I've invested in this financially.
Right, so that's a massive yeah, that's massive.
Yeah.
And then, Mike, yeah, and Pip, if you hadn't used the technology you had, but you've done this with people,
Yep.
what do you think that would have done to your timescales?
I know I've got some, when we've done like big corporate playbooks for like some of the consulting firms, probably the equivalent size of PACE, that is 6 months. Can be up to 6 months, 9 months, depending on just how complex the playbook is. But yeah, it's a manual build and potentially herding cats across all the different disciplines that need to be involved. The use of AI now, we probably build the same depth and breadth of playbook in probably actually more breadth with the use of video explainers and e-learning. We'll do that in about 5 to 6 weeks to have the playbook ready for pilot.
I'm going to offer up a counter challenge to the use of AI. I'm going to start with saying actually the use of AI to help us generate the content for this was phenomenal. It did help us deliver it quickly. It's done a very good job. It did a very good job back to the people we had sat around the AI. I was recently at a Gartner HR conference and we spoke a lot there about the impact of especially generative AI, which we've used for the development of this on people. When people who have got what Gartner called deep knowledge structures. It's the project manager who's done the job for 10, 20, 30 years. They've got the cuts, the bruises. They've fallen over. They've picked themselves up. Generative AI is really useful because they understand the output. They understand whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's indifferent. What generative AI is doing to people who've got weak knowledge structures, so maybe that's the junior person, it's the project management assistant who's been working in projects for 6 months. I'll use an example. You can type into ChatGPT or something and write me a business case why a giraffe should be the next leader of the Conservative Party. And if we didn't know it was ridiculous for a giraffe to be the leader of the Conservative Party, it would give you a really good business case. It would read very well. So I think that's the balance for me. AI can massively speed these things up. It's really great for doing data interrogation. But actually, if we let it dumb down our workforce, what we'll see in the next 5, 10, 20 years' time is actually I think our potential biggest portfolio risk is that we no longer have a talent pipeline of high-performing individuals that can deliver major complex projects. So we need to use AI for its value with people who really understand what it is that we're asking AI to do.
Yeah, we did a couple of talks with our clients about making sure they understood how AI actually works. And I think our head of our AI, he does basically AI doesn't tell you the truth. All it is working on is maths and calculations about what word would be the next word based on its instructions. So AI is never going to give you the truth, but if you can use it in guidance and you understand what response you want and you want to quickly articulate it and you want to write it in that style or you want to write it to that level of depth for someone, it is fantastic at that, but it will never tell you the truth. It's only ever going to work on a mathematical response set of numbers.
Thank you.
That's right. Cool. Well, listen, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.